In 1975, a secret was born inside a windowless laboratory at Kodak. A young engineer named Steve Sasson pushed a button and captured a world first, a digital photograph. No film, no chemicals, just pure electronic data. What he had built should have started a revolution. Instead, he was met with a dismissive smile and a chilling warning. That's cute, but don't tell anyone about it. At that time, Kodak was a corporate god, controlling nearly 90% of US film sales. But in that silent room, they made a choice that would trigger their total self-destruction. Why does a multi-billion-dollar giant choose comfort over survival? Because they were more afraid of losing their past than winning their future. Welcome to The Pivot Point. Today, we decode the psychology of a legend that chose stability over evolution. This is the real Kodak moment. To understand why Kodak fell, you first have to understand how high they stood. In the mid-20th century, Kodak was not just a company, it was the architect of human memory. By the 1970s, Kodak was an unstoppable force, controlling nearly 90% of the US film market and 85% of all camera sales. Its yellow boxes were everywhere. Kodak cameras and film had followed humanity from the top of Mount Everest to the surface of the moon. Every birthday, every wedding, every first step became a Kodak moment. They had achieved the ultimate dream of any business. They did not just sell a product. They sold an emotion. They sold nostalgia. Before nostalgia even had a price tag, they sold proof that life had happened. Their business model was a literal gold mine. Kodak used the razor and blade strategy. Sell the camera at a low profit. Put it into as many hands as possible, then make the real money again and again and again from the film, the processing, the chemicals, and the prints. Every photograph was another transaction. Every family album was another piece of the system, and Kodak controlled the system. But this astronomical wealth created a dangerous illusion. Inside the Rochester headquarters, the air was thick with the scent of silver halides and pure arrogance. They believed film was eternal. They believed the world would always need Kodak to remember itself, but they forgot a simple truth. They were not really in the business of selling chemicals. They were not even in the business of selling film. They were in the business of images, of memory, of moments, and that distinction was the difference between evolution and extinction. The engineer's name was Steve Sasson. He was young, curious, and working inside one of the most powerful imaging companies on Earth. In 1975, Sasson was given a task that sounded almost experimental: build a camera using electronic parts. What he created was strange. It used a lens from a movie camera. It used digital memory. It recorded the image onto a cassette tape. It displayed the result on a television screen. It was slow. It was heavy. It was awkward, but it worked. And that changed everything, because for the first time, photography did not need film. Imagine the moment. A young engineer walks into a room and shows Kodak executives a device that can capture an image without the very product. That made Kodak rich. For a normal technology company, that might sound exciting. For Kodak, it was terrifying, because Kodak was not just being shown a new camera. Kodak was being shown a world where customers might stop buying film, a world where chemical processing might disappear, a world where printed photographs might no longer be the default, a world where Kodak's strongest business could become unnecessary. This is the psychology of cannibalization. To embrace digital photography, Kodak would have to attack its own profit engine. It would have to say, "We will build the future, even if that future destroys our most profitable business." That is easy to admire and from the outside, but inside the company, the decision looked very different. Film was not declining yet. Customers were still buying it. Factories were still producing it. Retailers were still selling it. The margins were still attractive. Digital photography, on the other hand, was slow, expensive, low quality, and years away from mass adoption. So from the boardroom, the safe choice looked obvious. Protect the core business, delay the threat, study the technology, but do not let it damage the golden machine. And that is the tragedy. Kodak's decision was not irrational. It was logical. It protected the revenue of the present. It satisfied the expectations of the present. It defended the identity of the present, but it sacrificed the future. At some point, Sasson was asked a question that revealed everything. When could this technology become a serious threat to film? The answer was not tomorrow. It was closer to 15 or 20 years, and that timeline made the danger feel distant, not urgent, not immediate, not worth destroying the current business over. But this is how disruption works. It does not begin as a superior product. It begins as an inferior product with a different future. At first, it is too small to matter. Then, it is too fast to stop. Kodak saw the first stage, but it did not prepare for the second. And in that room, whether anyone understood it or not, Kodak reached its pivot point. One path led toward evolution, the other path led toward preservation. Kodak chose preservation. It chose the illusion of stability. And for a while, that choice worked. That is what makes this story so unsettling. The wrong decision did not punish Kodak immediately. For years, Kodak still looked powerful, still profitable, still respected, still safe. But beneath the surface, time had already started moving against it. Because the future does not need your permission, it only needs enough time. But was Kodak's collapse inevitable? Was every film company doomed once digital photography arrived? Not exactly, because across the ocean another company faced the same storm. Fujifilm, like Kodak. Fujifilm had built a massive business around photographic film. Like Kodak, it understood chemistry, imaging, color, coatings, materials. Like Kodak, it knew that digital photography that would eventually attack the core of its business. But Fujifilm made a different choice. It did not simply ask, how do we protect film? It asked a more dangerous, more uncomfortable question. What else can we become? This question changed everything, because Fujifilm began to look at its knowledge differently. Its expertise was not only in film, it was in chemistry, it was in materials science, it was in imaging, it was in precision manufacturing, it was in the manipulation of light, color, and surfaces. That knowledge could move, it could evolve, it could become medical imaging, it could become cosmetics, it could become pharmaceuticals, it could become advanced materials, it could become new businesses. That did not depend on the old world of film. This was not easy. It required Fujifilm to change its identity. And that is one of the hardest things any organization can do, because companies do not only have strategies, they have stories they tell themselves. Kodak's story was simple. We are the company of film. We are the company of Kodak moments. Fujifilm's story slowly became different. We are a technology company built on deep scientific capabilities. That difference mattered. Kodak was attached to the product. Fujifilm was more willing to reinterpret the knowledge behind the product. This is where the Kodak story becomes more than a story about bad timing, because Fujifilm proves that the fall of film did not automatically mean the death of every film company. There was another path. The question was not, can a film company survive the digital age? The question was, can a film company stop defining itself by film? Kodak struggled to answer yes, and this is where the illusion of stability becomes so dangerous, when the old identity still brings money. Changing it feels like betrayal. Betrayal of the brand, betrayal of employees, betrayal of shareholders, betrayal of the thing that made the company great. But sometimes evolution feels like betrayal before it feels like survival. Fujifilm accepted the pain of becoming something else. Kodak tried to remain itself, and in a changing world, remaining yourself can become a form of slow collapse. This is not just a business lesson, it is a human one. People do the same thing. We confuse our past success with our permanent identity. A skill that once made us valuable becomes the only skill we trust. A job that once gave us stability becomes the only future we can imagine. A relationship, a habit, a role, a reputation, something that once protected us can become the very thing that prevents us from changing. Kodak's tragedy was not that it lacked intelligence, it lacked the courage to stop being Kodak before the world stopped needing Kodak. There is a common myth about Kodak. The myth says Kodak ignored digital photography, but that is not completely true. Kodak did invest in digital technology. Kodak had patents. Kodak built digital cameras. Kodak understood that change was coming. The problem was more subtle. Kodak tried to enter the future while still protecting the past, and that is almost impossible, because every time Kodak looked at digital photography, it asked a question shaped by the old business. How can digital help film? How can digital lead people back to printing? How can digital fit inside the Kodak system? But the new world was not trying to fit inside the Kodak system. The new world was trying to replace it. That is why the company's response became confused. Kodak wanted digital technology, but it also wanted film profits. It wanted innovation, but without self-destruction. It wanted the future, but only if the future did not threaten the past. This is the sunk cost fallacy. The more you have invested in something, the harder it becomes to walk away from it. Kodak had invested in factories, in chemistry, in distribution, in retail, relationships, in brand identity, in decades of consumer behavior. Walking away from film did not feel like strategy. It felt like destroying the house while people were still living inside it. So Kodak delayed. It adapted slowly. It experimented, but cautiously. It moved toward digital, but often with one foot still planted firmly in the old world. And while Kodak hesitated, the meaning of photography changed. At first, photography was about preservation. You took a picture to remember something later. Then digital photography made it about immediacy. You took a picture and saw it instantly. Then the internet made it about sharing. You took a picture and sent it to someone else. Then smartphones and social platforms made it about communication. You took a picture, not just to remember life, but to participate in life. The photograph was no longer just an object, it became a message, a signal, a post, a status update, a form of identity. Kodak had built an empire around memories you could hold in your hand, but the world moved toward images that could move at the speed of attention, and this was a completely different game. In the old world, Kodak controlled the chain. In the new world, the chain disappeared. No film, no development, no waiting, no album required. Just capture, view, share, repeat. The tragedy is Kodak had seen the first step of this future, but it could not emotionally detach from the old one. It kept trying to make the future serve the past, and that is where many giants fail. They do not reject change completely. They accept it only in the ways that do not threaten their identity. But real change does threaten identity. That is why it is so hard. Kodak did not need more information. It needed a different kind of courage. The courage to cannibalize its own business. The courage to disappoint the present in order to survive the future. The courage to say, if someone is going to destroy film, it should be us. But Kodak waited, and eventually the decision was made for them. In January 2012, Kodak filed for bankruptcy protection. The company that had once defined photography could no longer survive the world. Photography had become. But the most painful part of the story is this. Photography did not die. People did not stop taking pictures. In fact, the opposite happened. The world began taking more pictures than ever before. Billions of images every day, everywhere, on phones, on apps, on social platforms, in messages, in feeds, in the invisible memory of the cloud. The human desire Kodak had served for more than a century did not disappear. It exploded. People still wanted to capture life. They still wanted to remember. They still wanted to share moments. They still wanted proof that something happened, that someone was there, that a moment mattered, but they no longer needed Kodak to do it. That same year, in 2012, Facebook agreed to buy Instagram for roughly $1 billion. Instagram had no film empire, no chemical plants, no decades of retail dominance, no global system for printing photographs. It was a small company built for the new meaning of photography. Instant, social, mobile, endless, and that contrast is brutal. In the same year, the old king of photography entered bankruptcy, and the new language of photography was valued at $1 billion. The world did not stop loving photographs. It simply changed what a photograph was. Kodak's mistake was not that it failed to predict technology. Its mistake was deeper. It believed stability was safety. It believed the present was proof. It believed that because film was profitable today, it could remain central tomorrow. But profit can become a sedative. It can calm a company at the very moment it should be afraid. It can make danger look distant. It can make evolution look unnecessary. It can turn success into a prison. That is the real lesson of Kodak. The pivot point is rarely the moment when the world changes. More often, it is the moment when you are asked to change before the world forces you to. Kodak faced that moment in 1975. It had the technology, it had the talent, it had the brand, it had the first glimpse of the future. But it did not have the courage to evolve, while the old world was still profitable. And that is why This story is not only about Kodak, it is about every company that protects yesterday's success until tomorrow disappears. It is about every leader who delays a hard decision because today's numbers still look good. It is about every person who knows they need to change but keeps telling themselves, not yet, because the old life still works, the old skill still pays, the old identity still feels safe, but the future rarely asks for permission, and by the time change becomes obvious, it may no longer be an opportunity. It may already be a verdict. Kodak did not fail because it lacked technology. Kodak failed because it chose the illusion of stability over the risk of evolution. It invented the future and then chose the past. Kodak's story is not just a warning from the past. It is a question for the present. What are we protecting today that may destroy us tomorrow? If this story made you think, subscribe to The Pivot Point. Here, we decode the decisions where empires are won, industries are lost, and futures are decided. Until the next Pivot Point.